What's going on, everyone? Welcome back. Today we have got our NFL mock draft version 4.0, our final mock before the actual NFL draft takes place. Only a few days away now. And with the combine and with free agency having come and gone for the most part, there's no better time to go ahead and put it all together, include some trades as well, and to the best of our abilities, predict how this first round will play out, which teams will move up, which will move down, and what the selections will be. So with that being said, if you guys enjoy, hit that like button, subscribe, and for now, let's get right into it. With the first pick overall, the Cincinnati Bengals select quarterback Joe Burrow, and this is pretty much as simple as it gets. The Bengals are a quarterback-needy team picking first overall, and Joe Burrow is the clear-cut number one quarterback prospect this year. He's healthy. He's coming off a record-setting season. He's got a Heisman, and he's coming off a national championship victory as well. Add to that the fact that he's an Ohio native. The Bengals should immediately turn their card in and make this one official. Heck, they should have made it official a couple of months ago. To nobody's surprise, Burrow to the Bengals at 1. With the second pick overall, the Washington Redskins select defensive end Chaisson. And even though we've thrown around the idea of what could happen should the Redskins go quarterback here, the fact remains is after the trade for Kyle Allen and the connection he has with Ron Rivera, his former head coach in Carolina, and now the new head coach of Washington, the chances of a quarterback being taken here become less and less. But don't worry for Washington fans, because Chaisson is a great prospect. He is the number one overall prospect in this entire draft class. He's touted to be better than either of the Bosa brothers, which is a scary thought. And he is also at a position that's at a premium in the NFL, edge rusher. On top of that, one that can get to the quarterback. With Rivera's defensive background, I think this is a pairing that will go hand in hand. With the third overall pick, the Miami Dolphins are now on the clock as they trade up with the Detroit Lions, sending the 5th and 26th overall picks to move up to number 3 and take quarterback Tua Tagovailoa. Now look, there's a lot to dissect here. When it comes to the Detroit side of things, we'll go ahead and touch more on that once we get to that 5th overall pick. But as far as the trade itself, let's start there, because you can make the argument that the Dolphins don't even make this trade, that they stay put at number 5, because there's a lot of concern and risk related to a trade like this. And at the same time, you could make the argument that the trade itself could actually be executed by another team that's not the Dolphins, specifically the LA Chargers. So let's start there, because I think purely from a capital perspective, the Dolphins just have more ammunition, which will, at the end of the day, entice the Detroit Lions more so. But in all honesty, what this all comes down to is how the Dolphins feel about Tua Tagovailoa. Now, I'm of the mindset that he is by far the next best available quarterback. And I've said it before, I'll say it again. If he was healthy, he would be my number 1 overall quarterback over Joe Burrow. But that's not the case, and the injury is why we're having this discussion to begin with. Because it's no coincidence that now, with only a couple of days to go to the draft, you're hearing all these rumors, more so than ever, about the name Justin Herbert. And I'll say, that's to be expected, because this happens every single year. It happened last year. It happens this year. It's going to happen the year after that. And it's purely because teams want to go ahead and shroud their own picks in mystery as to prevent other teams from selecting their targeted prospects. I personally think that all this Justin Herbert talk is all smoke. And the Dolphins really do believe in Tua. Heck, all the pairings between Tua and the Dolphins, they were still happening when Tua got hurt in the middle of the college football season. And that was months ago. The only thing that's really changed since then is that, there's been an isolation in place. So team doctors don't have as much access to these players as they normally would. But I would have to believe that the Dolphins have still done their homework profusely when it comes to selecting a quarterback, which, let's say this, that's what we all expect them to do with this first pick that they have in the first round. And I think that is what's going to lead them to take quarterback Tua Tagovailoa, not Justin Herbert, not anybody else. Again, I'm of the mindset that that is all smoke. It's all hype. Look, maybe you think otherwise. Let me hear it in the comments section. If you're a Dolphins fan, if you're a Chargers fan, if you're a Tua fan, why you think that this pick could play out differently or why it'll play out exactly like we have. Either way, I'm absolutely extremely curious about this selection because it could have a huge domino effect on future picks in this first round. With the fourth overall pick, the New York Giants select offensive lineman Tristan Wirfs. And when it comes to this pick, again, it's a really intriguing one because maybe more so than any one before, it could have the biggest domino effect in the early parts of the first round. And I say this because the Giants could go one of two ways, either offense or defense. And it's between two players, really. One of the elite offensive linemen, in this case Tristan Wirfs, or Isaiah Simmons. Now, I'm in the camp of Wirfs, or one again, take your pick of one of the offensive linemen. Doesn't really matter. It's going to come down to personal preference. They're all in a very similar tier. I think it's going to be Wirfs because he is the most versatile. He had a great combine, and he could play at multiple spots on that O-line. But more importantly, why I think it'll be an offensive lineman is because if you look at the way that the Giants have drafted these last 2 years, they've gone running back with Barkley, then they've gone quarterback with Jones. Now it makes sense that they've continued to fortify that offensive line, which is an issue that wasn't fully addressed in free agency, in order to protect Jones and open up the holes for Barkley. It's as simple as that. We know Gettleman loves to go ahead and target the trenches, so offensive line makes sense again there. From that perspective, I know it's not as flashy and sexy as Isaiah Simmons, but from a long-term perspective, this pick has to be an offensive lineman. All the signs point to that, and I'm sticking with it. With the fifth overall pick, the Detroit Lions are back on the clock after having traded down with the Dolphins and now select defensive back Jeff Okudah. And like we promised, we're going to go ahead and break down that trade from the Detroit side of things. Let's start with the fact that this is the dream scenario for the Detroit Lions, and that is an absolute fact simply because there is no team in this first round that is better positioned to trade down, get more draft capital, which, by the way, the Detroit Lions need, especially defensively, and still get the guy, an elite prospect, that they would have gotten at number 3 if they stayed put. And that prospect is obviously Jeff Okudah, because the departure of Darius Slay kind of put that in stone. I know Desmond Trufant is there, but he's not the long-term solution. Patricia is a defensive-minded head coach. So Okudah makes all the sense. I think every single person in Detroit is holding their breath and hoping that they get a phone call either from Miami or from the LA Chargers in order to make this dream a reality. At number 6, the LA Chargers select quarterback Justin Herbert. And after the trade between the Detroit Lions and the Miami Dolphins, the result of that is that the Chargers no longer have Tua available to them and now go next big name quarterback available, and that would be Justin Herbert. For what it's worth, we've said before that our best available quarterback after Tua is Jordan Love, but the consensus from a lot of different places, especially these teams picking in the early parts of the first round, is that Justin Herbert is that third best quarterback, or depending on what you believe, maybe even second best quarterback. So that leads me to believe that it'll be Herbert, not Jordan Love, being taken third overall, even though it's not what I would personally do. But the point being is the Chargers right now don't have a long-term solution at quarterback. Tyrod Taylor, no matter what the front office tells you, he is not going to be the long-term solution for the LA Chargers. Now, I know maybe some people expected a signing of a Jameis Winston or a Cam Newton, which I honestly think would make more sense, and both are better options than what the Chargers could get if they stay put at number 6. But since neither one of those signings have taken place yet, fat chance that it'll happen before the actual draft. Point being is they want a young signal caller that they can mold into their franchise guy. I think it'll end up being Justin Herbert here. Now, there's an outside chance that if the Chargers are absolutely set on Tua or Herbert and that guy gets picked before they have a chance, that they could go in another direction. Personally, I still think quarterback is the way that they will go, but maybe there's an outside chance that they go offensive line or best player available. I wouldn't completely discount it, but right now I would say quarterback, specifically Herbert, is the front runner. At number 7, the Carolina Panthers select defensive tackle Derrick Brown. And when it comes to the Panthers and the possibilities that they have here, I think that the most likely thing right now is them staying put and going with a defensive tackle. At one point, I believed it would be for them to trade down with one of those offensive line needy teams because there's a lot of them. And there is a very real chance that there will be a run on offensive linemen in the early parts of the first 10 or so picks. But the more I look at it, the more it seems like the Panthers are trying to fit a multi-year rebuild into just a couple of months of free agency, which is not the prudent or intelligent thing to do because they are by far and away the worst team, the fourth best team in the NFC South as it stands right now. They need all the help in the world, maybe more so than any other team defensively. That's why I personally believe they should trade down. But again, all signs point to them staying put and taking the best player available. When it comes to that player at the number 7 spot, I think it's Derrick Brown because of what we've seen in free agency. They've been decimated at the defensive tackle position. K'Wan Short, also, are they going to go ahead and stick with him in a couple of years? Who knows? But either way, they need another defensive tackle opposite Short. They've lost Poe. They've lost McCoy. They've lost Butler. The list goes on. So they need desperate help there. The other possibility is Isaiah Simmons. I wouldn't be shocked, honestly, at this point, considering the college gimmick that seems to be in full effect that Matt Rule wants to run. Not sure it's going to work, but we'll see. If that's the way he goes, then Isaiah Simmons makes a lot of sense. Again, I've been on record saying that I think Derrick Brown is the way to go here. I wouldn't pick Isaiah Simmons this early on because to me he doesn't have a solidified position to play. I think he's more suited for a linebacker, but again, his best comps are Derwin James and Jamal Adams. Not that those guys aren't terrific players, but they're safeties. So just bringing that up again. But like we said, as of right now, I've got the Panthers staying put, taking Derrick Brown. Wouldn't shock me if they do trade down to get more capital. But again, just reading the tea leaves and what's recently happened, signs point towards them staying put at 7, going with Derrick Brown. At number 8, the Arizona Cardinals select offensive lineman Jedrick Wills. And this pick pretty much became set in stone after the trade for DeAndre Hopkins, where that filled a huge area of need, and it didn't really cost the Cardinals all that much, adding a huge weapon to that offense. Now go ahead and round out that offense even more so with a stalwart offensive lineman, day 1 starter in Wills. Now, in all reality, it'll probably come down to personal team preference in terms of which one of these top 4 offensive linemen they select. But what we do know is that this pick more than likely will be an offensive lineman. The only question is which one. In this case, I've got Jedrick Wills. I think he's a little bit less raw than some of these other guys. He's a little bit safer. So insert him, Arizona, day 1. At number 9, the Tampa Bay Buccaneers are on the clock as they trade up with the Jacksonville Jaguars, swapping first-round picks, also sending a third-rounder this year and then a future 2021 draft pick in order to select offensive lineman Mekhi Becton. All right, so let's break down this trade because more than likely, I believe there will be some type of trade for a team to move up to grab one of these elite offensive linemen that will start to fly off the board. If it's not at number 7 with the Carolina Panthers, it will be here with the Jacksonville Jaguars. I firmly believe that, because the Jaguars are in a good spot to move back a couple of spots, add some picks, and still be able to get a great player that can contribute probably to their defense right from the get-go. So in terms of what team pulls the trigger, there's a lot of possibilities. I've got the Bucs. I have got the New York Jets potentially, or an outside team like the Atlanta Falcons with a drop of a top talent like an Isaiah Simmons, as is kind of happening right now, could potentially be in the works. But I have the Buccaneers as one of these more desperate teams, more likely to do so, specifically because of that. With the addition of Tom Brady, they're kind of in this short-term win-now window, more so than almost any other team in the NFL. So they need to maximize the pieces around Brady. They focus on upgrading that offensive line, adding another piece. Mekhi Becton absolutely blew it away in the combine. He is a athletic freak. He is a mammoth of a human. He can absolutely move people around. And I do think he can go ahead and upgrade that offensive line. It's going to cost the Bucs a little bit, but again, I think it's worth it when you consider what type of window you're working with here with Tom Brady under a 2-year contract. With the 10th pick overall, the Cleveland Browns select offensive lineman Andrew Thomas. And this is a pick that's a pretty simple one. Again, it's been penciled in for a while. The Browns need to upgrade the offensive line position. They're in a perfect spot to get that last elite offensive line with this expected run on tackles early on within the first 10 picks. The potential game changer here would be the New York Giants and what they decide to do with that 4th overall pick, whether they go offensive lineman or on the defensive side of the football. As it stands right now, they go offensive lineman, so the Browns are looking at the last available elite tackle prospect. That is Andrew Thomas. They need to continue upgrading the offensive line. Adding Conklin in free agency was a very nice piece, but they are not done. Go ahead, add some more pieces in the trenches, give some more protection for Baker Mayfield to see what he can actually do. And if he is the answer at the quarterback position for years to come. With the 11th overall pick, the Atlanta Falcons are on the clock as they trade up with the New York Jets, swapping first-round picks, also sending a 3rd rounder this year, and then a future 2021 draft pick in order to select linebacker Isaiah Simmons. Now, in this scenario, after the Jets see that run on offensive linemen and they decide to take a phone call from the uber-aggressive Atlanta Falcons, who are very well known for making these type of trade up moves to get a guy they believe in. They are rumored to be one of these teams that are making calls to get a difference maker defensively, and I can absolutely see that being the case if Isaiah Simmons slips. Now, maybe you're saying the chances of that are slim, but honestly, if Simmons makes it past the New York Giants, who, again, we highlighted their need for an offensive lineman, and the Carolina Panthers, who should probably be looking at a defensive tackle, then I could very well see Isaiah Simmons making it right around to this range. And if that's the case, I think there's no team more likely to make this type of move than the Atlanta Falcons. They desperately need defensive help. They are set offensively. Simmons is one of these hybrids. He is an absolute freak of nature. Just the run on offensive lineman ends up being not his fault, but he ends up slipping due to it. No matter, the Atlanta Falcons greatly benefit from it. Whether they play him at linebacker or safety, they have needs at both positions. That's why I think this could be a very good fit for them. Dan Quinn there with that defensive-minded mentality. I would love this move for the Atlanta Falcons. At number 12, the Las Vegas Raiders select wide receiver Jerry Jeudy. And honestly, this is a pairing that has stayed kind of the same for a while, but with good reason. The Raiders need help at the wide receiver position. We all know how the Antonio Brown situation worked out. Tyrell Williams is a nice piece, but he's not a number one wide receiver. The Raiders can't have Waller be their leading pass catcher at the tight end level again. And to me, Jeudy is a top 10 level type of talent. He is my number one wide receiver. He is a route running master compared to these other rookies coming out this year, whether it's Jeudy or CeeDee Lamb. I think they're both in that tier 1 category. Honestly, the Raiders can't go wrong with either. Probably comes down to personal preference, but for now, it is Jerry Jeudy in my eyes. At number 13, the San Francisco 49ers select wide receiver CeeDee Lamb. And the 49ers have to be doing backflips here because Lamb is still available, a tier 1 wide receiver prospect. And this is in large part thanks to the New York Jets trading down in our mock. But even if they were to stay put and go wide receiver, the New York Jets that is, I could still see the 49ers going another wide receiver, potentially Henry Ruggs here. That's what all the signs seem to be pointing to. I've said before, defensive tackle is also a possibility, but it seems like wide receiver is the preferred position, especially after the departure of Emmanuel Sanders. CeeDee Lamb is going to be a day 1 starter opposite Deebo Samuel. I absolutely love CeeDee Lamb. Him and Jerry Jeudy are 1A and 1B in terms of the number 1 wide receiver in this draft class. At number 14, the Jacksonville Jaguars are back on the clock after having traded down with the Buccaneers and select defensive tackle Javon Kinlaw. And the Jags are one of these teams that can benefit from a trade down of a couple spots and still potentially get the player they would have targeted if they had stayed put. And that's exactly what, honestly, I would have had happening here, because at number 9, I really had them pegged going with Kinlaw. A lot of people are very high on him in terms of a top 10 prospect. Some even think he has a higher ceiling than Derrick Brown, which pretty much tells you all you need to know. The Jaguars have a big need defensively, pretty much from start to finish. Defensive line, to the linebackers, to the secondary. So adding another pick in the 3rd round will go ahead and help them address some of those holes. I'd probably say defensive line and the secondary are the 2 biggest holes, but they can go ahead and add another stable cornerback later on with their 2nd first-round pick, because there is a bigger drop-off in terms of defensive tackle level from Kinlaw to the next guy than I would say there is from a Okudah and a Henderson to the next group of cornerbacks. At number 15, the Denver Broncos select defensive back C.J. Henderson. And maybe a little bit of an upset pick here, considering that Henry Ruggs is still available. But I would argue that defensive back is just as big of a need as wide receiver for the Broncos, maybe bigger considering the departure of Chris Harris in free agency. And when you pair that with the defensive mentality of Vic Fangio as the head coach, well, another point in favor of going defense here. I also like Henderson in terms of the potential he has. A lot of scouts are starting to make some chatter in terms of Henderson being closer in talent to Jeff Okudah than what was originally anticipated. But the point being here, I think that the Broncos can afford to go DB because of the large pool of wide receiver talent this year and the expected run on defensive backs and the drop-off in talent from the end of the 1st round to the middle of the 2nd round compared to wide receivers. For that reason, C.J. Henderson is the selection here. At pick number 16, the New York Jets are back on the clock after having traded down with the Atlanta Falcons and now select wide receiver Henry Ruggs. So breaking down this trade, obviously it's beneficial from the fact that the Jets get extra ammunition, but it's also probably the riskiest trade that we've had so far. And let me explain what I mean, because if the Jets stay put at number 11, which I think is a very real possibility, but the only way that I see that happening is if one of the top 4 offensive linemen is still there. If that doesn't happen, then I wouldn't be shocked to see the Jets move down a couple of spots, but we all know that the wide receiver is probably the next biggest need for the Jets. However, there are several teams behind them that are also targeting wide receivers. The 49ers, the Raiders, the Broncos. Now, with the Broncos deciding to go defensive back here, the Jets are big winners because they still get a wide receiver, a top 3 guy that many people are saying, watch out. Ruggs is a dark horse candidate to potentially be the first or second wide receiver off the board. Now, I've told you guys how I feel about Jeudy and CeeDee Lamb. They're in a tier 1 class by themselves, but anytime you run a 40-yard dash like Henry Ruggs did, then it's going to generate some buzz and you're going to start to move up draft boards. Robbie Anderson leaving the New York Jets obviously leaves a big hole, so this is a big get for them. It's going to be a big risk, big reward type of situation, and in this scenario, it pays off for the Jets. At pick number 17, the Dallas Cowboys select defensive end Javon Chaisson. And for the Cowboys, you have to think that this pick will be on the defensive side of the football, either on the D-line or in the secondary. I'm specifically focusing on edge rusher because I think that is a more valuable position at this point in time. And even more so when you consider the loss of Robert Quinn in free agency. I know the Cowboys went ahead and added Aldon Smith on a 1-year deal, but really, how much confidence do you have that he plays a full 16 games? And how do you know what type of performance you're going to get from him considering how much time he has been away from football? For that reason, you go ahead and add the number 2 prospect at the defensive end position behind Chase Young, a young, cheaper version compared to what Robert Quinn would have cost you. I think that would be a win for the Dallas Cowboys. At pick number 18, the Philadelphia Eagles are on the clock as they trade up with the Miami Dolphins, swapping first-round picks, also sending a third-rounder this year to Miami in order to move up and select wide receiver Justin Jefferson. Now, if you've kept up with my previous mocks, you know that this is a pairing between Jefferson and the Eagles that hasn't changed. Instead, what has changed is at what point the Eagles are selecting Jefferson. And that's because the recent sentiment is that not only are the Eagles trying to move up for a pass catcher, but that Justin Jefferson could very well not be available to the Eagles if they stay put at number 21, that he could go several picks earlier. He's a wide receiver that really helped his stock during the combine, and it shows. His stock has been rising for a while now. And anytime you're the Eagles and in your current wide receiver situation where your top 2 guys are Deshaun Jackson and Alshon Jeffrey, considering their age and more importantly their health after what we watched last year, you know you have to go ahead and get a younger, healthier option. Justin Jefferson is exactly that. Go ahead, add another target to the Eagles' pass-catching group other than Zach Ertz. At pick number 19, the Las Vegas Raiders select quarterback Jordan Love. And it's been no secret to anybody that the Raiders front office has been lukewarm about their commitment to Derek Carr at best. Now, they did bring in Marcus Mariota, but that's on a short-term deal. So I really think that Gruden is not going to be able to resist getting his own guy, his own quarterback into the organization, first round type of pick. We know the hype on Jordan Love. I told you guys, he's my number 3 overall quarterback prospect. I love the ceiling that he has. Now, don't get me wrong, he is still very raw, and the way he's probably going to get the most out of a quick start in the NFL is if he sits his rookie year. And I think this is a good situation for him to do exactly that because Derek Carr, at least short-term future, will be with the Raiders this year. But maybe there's a bit of a quarterback competition with the addition of Jordan Love. I think Carr would ultimately win out this year. But again, this would be a more so of a long-term investment for the Raiders, who I don't see bringing back Derek Carr on a multi-year deal. Jordan Love has been compared to Patrick Mahomes, and anytime you get those types of comparisons, you know that some team will take a chance on you, even if it's a little bit earlier than it probably should happen. I think the Raiders are one of these teams that would make this type of move, especially when Gruden is so desperate to find his guy at the quarterback spot. At pick number 20, the Jacksonville Jaguars select defensive back Trevon Diggs. And for the Jaguars, with their first selection, they went Javon Kinlaw, fortifying the defensive line. Now they go ahead and fortify the back end of that defense, specifically the cornerback position that has been laid to waste after the departures of Jalen Ramsey and AJ Boye. And guess what? Trevon Diggs is that next best available defensive back. He would be a day one starter. And more importantly, he is a younger and cheaper version of what the Jaguars previously had. At pick number 21, the Miami Dolphins, after having traded down with the Philadelphia Eagles, now select offensive lineman Josh Jones. Even though the Dolphins went ahead and shipped their third first-round pick in order to select quarterback Tua Tagovailoa earlier in this mock draft, not only were they able to gain some draft capital with that second trade they executed with the Eagles, but they still land a great offensive line prospect in Josh Jones. He's in that second tier of offensive linemen, and anytime you draft a young quarterback that has had issues staying healthy, especially like Tua, fortifying the offensive line is a must. I've said it about a team like the New York Giants and Daniel Jones and their need to draft an offensive lineman. Same situation with Josh Jones and the Miami Dolphins. I think they will definitely be looking at offensive line at some point in the first round. With the 22nd overall pick, the Minnesota Vikings select wide receiver Denzel Mims. And for the Vikings, we've said it before, the trade of Stefon Diggs opened up a glaring hole at the wide receiver position. Now, I know that Adam Thielen is still there, but that Vikings offense really operated at its best when they had that 1-2 punch at the wide receiver position. And there's no doubt a huge drop-off now in talent after Adam Thielen and the next best wide receiver on that team. Denzel Mims is another one of these wide receivers that had a very good combine. His draft stock has been going up. I think he would be a great fit opposite Adam Thielen. Give Kirk Cousins some more viable options. And I know there's been some rumors about the Vikings potentially making some trades before the draft for some disgruntled wide receivers, but since it still hasn't materialized, I continue to have them slotted with a wide receiver at some point in this first round. At number 23, the New England Patriots select defensive end A.J. Epineza. And I honestly believe the Patriots could go a number of different ways here, whether it's offensive line, D-line, or a linebacker, especially after the departure of Kyle Van Noy. But the more I look at it, the more I realize Epineza is one of these prototypical New England Patriot Bill Belichick prospects, blue collar type of dude that you just insert day one. He's reliable, he's consistent, and he's going to do what he's told. He had a pretty good season in Iowa, especially towards the end of the year. Unfortunately for him, he didn't have, a incredible combine, kind of pedestrian, so he was hurt by that. But I still think you get good value for him here. And anytime you can get a consistent edge rusher, you go ahead and take it. As far as other possibilities, obviously there's been a lot of talk about quarterback after the departure of Tom Brady, but I don't see Bill Belichick. It would be against his MO to reach on a quarterback to kind of go ahead and panic and take a first rounder, especially with some of these unproven guys and the question marks that are there for the prospects after a Herbert and a Love. So the only other real possibility here to me, it would be trading down. If anything, that's probably the most likely thing because we know how much the Patriots stockpile picks and try to go ahead and get those extra second, third, fourth rounders. So if there's another team that calls them that's in need for a quarterback and they try and make that move, I wouldn't be shocked at all to see the Patriots move back. But for now, as long as they stay put, I like Epineza to New England. At number 24, the New Orleans Saints select linebacker Patrick Queen. And honestly, I don't think the Saints have that many deficiencies on their roster at this point in time. Maybe you could say it was wide receiver, but after the signing of Emmanuel Sanders, it kind of resolved that issue short term at least. So, with that being the case, also don't count out a trade back here for them to get some ammunition. But if that's not the case, then I look at the defense, specifically either the play opposite Marshawn Lattimore and adding another cornerback, or the linebacker play after the departure of AJ Klein. And I specifically focus on linebackers because I think Patrick Queen, depending how you feel about him and Murray, he could be the second best linebacker in this class. And maybe he's even an upgrade over AJ Klein. So the fact that he's an LSU kid, local prospect, also definitely helps. I like him with a pairing to the New Orleans Saints. At number 25, the Minnesota Vikings select safety Xavier McKinney. And for the Vikings, I've been saying it for a while that probably on paper their two biggest needs are wide receiver and secondary help. Well, here they add the best safety in this entire draft in McKinney after having addressed the wide receiver position previously with their earlier pick. Now, I wouldn't be shocked at all if this is a pick in terms of the cornerbacks, especially after the departures of Waynes and Xavier Rhodes. That position has absolutely been decimated, but I think McKinney being the best safety prospect in this entire class offers a little bit more value. And also, don't sleep on the contract talks between Anthony Harris and the Vikings. If that isn't resolved, then McKinney becomes even more valuable. He would be younger, he would be cheaper, and either way you slice it, he's going to be a valuable addition to the secondary day one. At number 26, the Detroit Lions are on the clock after their earlier trade with the Miami Dolphins and now select defensive tackle Ross Blacklock. And for the Lions, I think a lot of people expect them to go defense early in this draft, considering how much they struggled on that side of the football last year and also some of the losses they had in free agency. Now, it's no secret that there's been a lot of buzz between Okudah and the Lions in the early parts of this draft, but I would say a dark horse candidate that's also been mentioned from time to time, obviously not as often as Okudah, has been a prospect like a Derrick Brown, who is a defensive tackle. Now, definitely Blacklock, not in that tier 1 prospect rank in terms of DTs like a Brown or a Kinlaw, but he is my next best available defensive tackle in that tier 2 list of prospects. So that's exactly what the Detroit Lions do. They add a solid defensive tackle prospect that they can insert into their defensive line as they continue to upgrade that positional group. With the 27th overall pick, the Seattle Seahawks select defensive end Yetur Gross-Matos. And since there has been no movement between Seattle and Jadeveon Clowney, we have to operate under the assumption that they still need a day one defensive end. That is a big hole on their roster at this point in time. Honestly, though, they could go a number of different ways here. Maybe offensive line, defensive end, like we said, secondary help as well. But I think Matos is one of these prospects that is enticing because even though he could be a project for a while and is a little bit raw, he has all the physical tools to be successful. And it kind of explains why his draft projection has been all over the place, whether it's mid-teens to late 20s. But the Seattle Seahawks are patient. They're one of those teams that are willing to take a chance on one of these type of prospects. That's why I like the pairing between Matos and Seattle. At number 28, the Baltimore Ravens select linebacker Kenneth Murray. And this has been one of these popular team and player pairings for a while in terms of areas of need. Now, in all honesty, there's not that many holes on this roster from top to bottom. Maybe the biggest one would be linebacker, which makes sense why that has been projected to Baltimore for a while now. I selected Murray here, but don't sleep on a dark horse candidate like Zach Bound from Wisconsin. His name has been generating some buzz, specifically to Baltimore, so that wouldn't shock me at all. But for now, linebacker seems like the safe pairing for the Baltimore Ravens as they continue to load up on talent and get ready to make another postseason run in 2020. At number 29, the Tennessee Titans select defensive back Christian Fulton. And the Titans really could go a number of different ways here with this pick, whether it's offensive line or on the defensive side of the football, anywhere from the defensive line all the way to the secondary. Now, I'm focusing in on the secondary because the Titans did also suffer some departures there in free agency, looking at Logan Ryan. So Fulton is, again, one of these next best defensive backs. There will be a run on these guys towards the middle to end of the first round. So this seems like a natural spot for Christian Fulton. There's an area of need, and he is one of these tier 2 next best available defensive backs that I'm sure the Titans would love to bring in. At number 30, the Green Bay Packers select wide receiver Brandon Ayuk. And I know the Packers added Devin Funchess pretty late in free agency, but in my eyes, that doesn't get rid of their need for a wide receiver opposite Davante Adams, because I see Funchess as a wide receiver 3 on an offense. So a wide receiver 2 behind Adams is still a need for Green Bay. It'll probably come down to personal preference between the prospects that are still available. Maybe a Rieger, maybe a Ayuk like we currently have. But at the end of the day, I think we all remember how much the Packers suffered in the passing attack last year when Davante Adams was hurt. So wide receiver would definitely be a viable option here at number 30. At number 31, the San Francisco 49ers select defensive back Jeff Gladney. And after looking at the offensive side of the football with their first selection, the 49ers go ahead and get back to the defensive side by adding a secondary piece here opposite Richard Sherman. And honestly, other than Richard Sherman, that secondary kind of struggled for the 49ers last year. And even if you look at Sherman, he also kind of showed a little bit of concern during the postseason run that the 49ers had. He's not getting any younger, so this pick of Gladney could also be a nice future long-term investment pick. For now, go ahead, line him up opposite Richard Sherman, let him learn from Sherman, and then he could be a nice long-term piece in a couple of years. And finally, at number 32, the Super Bowl champion Kansas City Chiefs select defensive back Noah Igbinoghene. And for the Chiefs, when you look at that offense, not too many glaring holes there, especially after Sammy Watkins restructured his contract. So then you go to the defense. Maybe you go defensive line and prepare for a future without Chris Jones if contract talks kind of fall apart, or you go with the secondary. And that's where I choose to look for now, because if you look at the Chiefs, they really didn't have much in the secondary outside of Tyrann Mathieu. So that's what they go ahead and do here. Add another piece there at the cornerback spot. Igbinoghene has been someone that's been trending up. I definitely could see him being as a late first round, early second round type of pick. I like the fit for the Kansas City Chiefs and Igbinoghene. So with that, we wrap up this final NFL mock draft of ours. And as always, let us hear it in the comments section. Did you agree, disagree with these picks? What do you think your favorite teams will do and why? Where do you think your top prospects will end up? And what types of trades that we didn't mention do you think will take place in this first round? And as always, if you guys enjoyed, hit that like button, subscribe, and in the meantime, we will see you guys in future videos.